This is Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia, where we answer your questions about what it's like to live, work, and travel in Russia. Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the standard of living as an expat in Moscow. Matt, start off with your first scenario, your first experience in Russia, and
Sure.
what you were able to afford.
Yeah, sure. So when I first got to Moscow, my salary was 100,000 rubles. I worked at a tech company as kind of marketing and English editor. And the apartment that I rented was at Shukinskaya in Moscow. That's kind of in the northwest-ish area. I don't know, maybe 7 stops from the center. And I paid 40,000 rubles for that. That was a one-bedroom, or in Russia they say two-room apartment. And it was relatively close to the metro. I could either take a quick tram to the metro, which was very fast, or walk. Maybe it was about 10 minutes. So overall, it was quite comfortable. In addition to rent, you have, let's say that for rent, that's about as cheap as you can go to get a decent apartment. And this wasn't like some, fancy apartment. It was, I would say, slightly above average by Russian standards.
Okay, so 40,000 for how many square meters or feet?
It was 55 square meters, which is probably close to 600 square feet.
Almost 600. So actually, that's fairly sizable.
Yeah, yeah. And my girlfriend, who's now my wife, we lived together there, and it was comfortable enough for that. She might disagree. She was not a huge fan of that apartment. But in addition to rent, you have then like your utilities, and let's say utilities generally doesn't change much. I mean, if you get a significantly bigger place, then they might change. But I would say maybe 1,000 or 2,000 rubles a month for all of the utilities. Then for TV and internet, I think we paid 600 or 700 rubles, which is $10 a month for
Right.
high-speed internet, and there had to have been at least 100 channels on the TV. Some were even in English. So that's about all for utilities. Let's say 3,000 rubles maximum. So that brings it to 43,000 rubles a month for kind of fixed costs. And then, you get a metro pass if if you're commuting every day, that's up to 2,000, but you don't have to spend that. You could probably get less. Just pay by the ride if you're not riding every day, twice. Yeah, I mean, I think you could easily keep your fixed costs under 50,000, which would be half of your income, and then that would leave you with 50,000 to spend and save on having fun and food. Food, if you're willing to,
Right.
Live on and eat, typical Russian food, it's very, very cheap.
What year was that?
That was 2015. And I'll get
Okay,
into
so the ruble had always the ruble had already, yeah. Okay.
It was about 65 or 70 to $1 rubles, which is similar to what it is today.
Okay. So what would you do for entertainment?
So at that time, I don't know, go out with friends maybe once a week, have a couple beers, or go to a restaurant. Again, things are quite cheap. So I don't know, I budgeted probably 5 to 10,000 rubles a month for just having fun. And then on food, I think we spent, I don't know, we probably spent on the high end 20 to 25,000.
Okay.
So, I mean, realistically, I wasn't saving much more than a couple $100 a month, $100 or $200 a month at that point.
But that wasn't your goal, was it?
No, not at that point. At that point, I was just trying to get started. I had a professional job, so I was kind of gaining experience. And I can talk about further experience when I was making a bit more money in Moscow. But what about you? What was your situation like when you first got to Moscow?
So when I first started working in Moscow, it was 2009, and that was when the ruble was quite strong. It was around under 30 rubles to $1. But
well, maybe that's not
my
the
salary, yeah, my salary at that time, basically, let's see, it was 45,000 rubles. So it was pretty much on par with kind of what you were doing in 2015. But with that, I spent, I think, 20,000 for a room in an apartment. 15. No, I think it was 15,000, and then I had about half of it left for food and just. But the first time I was in Moscow, I was working in Moscow in 2009. That was, I wasn't there to save money. I was just I got
Right.
kind of first English teaching job that I could get, and spent most of my free time with my fiance at the time, my wife now. So we just we lived very frugally, and but in terms of like where the ruble is now, it would probably be around 70 to 80,000 rubles for the same type of work with the weak ruble now. So again, the cell phone, internet, utilities, that would run you probably 3,000 rubles or less.
That's still
The
today.
apartment in the first apartment that I had, so it was my wife and I. It was 31 square meters. So what was that? Yeah, I got
That's
to check real quick.
330 square feet, somewhere around there.
Yeah. 330 square feet. So it was quite small. It was like very tiny kitchen. You walk in and there's a small hallway that goes right to the kitchen and the bathroom on the right, and
Yep.
then living room and where we slept was where we slept. So, yeah, that was in 2009. And then I would say I would jump to kind of when I started wanting to save money, I would do private lessons. So really, that was kind of like existing, and then I taught English privately to actually start making more money.
Right.
But we spent almost a good 6 months to a year in that type of apartment and situation, and it wasn't too bad.
Right. Right. Well, after about a year and a half of working at the job that I had, I ended up getting a kind of more professional job. I started working at a international law firm in Moscow, and my salary there was 167,000 rubles. And in addition to that, I also continued to work at the tech company, kind of as a outside consultant, and I got to keep almost all of that salary. I basically was working on projects for them. So they would, give me a project, and it would be kind of like a 6-month project. There was never like immediately due work. So, and at night and on the weekend, I was working on that. So I was making another 100,000 there, still. So together, I had about 267,000 rubles in salary. And we moved to Dinamo, my fiance and I, and who's now my wife. And we lived just by the metro at Dinamo, and there we rented a 60 square meter apartment, and that's about 650 square feet or so. And that was 60,000 rubles, but that was much, much nicer inside. So really it wasn't much of a step up in terms of size, but it was a big step up in terms of what the Russians call remont inside.
Right.
And
Right.
utilities, again, they're about the same for internet, electricity, and heat and everything. I also should mention we had air conditioners in both of these apartments. So it does get very hot for a couple weeks every summer in Moscow, and the air conditioner is definitely nice, but it doesn't really affect the electric
I would say
bill.
that depends on the apartment that you have, because we had air conditioners in maybe the last 2 apartments only, so all the apartments up to that point. But if you're like in a corner apartment, then and you can't like open windows in on both sides of the building where the wind goes through, it was stuffy. But we were in a 3 bedroom, and it was in like an L shape, so you could open the windows in the kitchen or the living room, and on the opposite side of the building in the bedroom, in our bedroom, and the wind was plenty to
Interesting.
um,
Yeah, I don't know. I had
yeah.
in St. Petersburg, we did not have an air conditioner way back when, and it would get very, very hot, especially at night. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it gets so hot, but because it's not that hot outside, but inside the apartment buildings, it would get very hot and stuffy. As an American, I'm used to sleeping in relatively cool temperatures. The worst part actually was in the winter in Russia because you don't really have control of the heat. We literally, in all of the apartments that my
In
wife
most
and I
buildings,
lived in,
yeah.
we would just turn the heat off. Like it would just not run ever in our
Right.
apartment. And we would just be heated from the apartments on both sides of us. But if you have the heat on, it gets very, very hot. Something, about 80 degrees, I would say, Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
For an
yeah.
American, that's very, very hot, especially to sleep.
I think over time I just got used to it. I acclimated to it because it was still hot, but it wasn't as hot like when my family came to visit, and they were just really uncomfortable. So if you're moving to Russia, you know, and you're in your first year or two, then you would definitely probably want to get a place with
I don't
air
know.
conditioning.
After 5 years, I never got used to the heat in
Really?
the winter. I could survive without the air conditioning in the summer because really you don't need it that much. There are certainly days in Moscow where you definitely need it if you're used to it. But it's not, I mean, you can put up with it, right? But the heat in the winter was much more difficult, especially taking the train. Man, if you take the
Okay,
train in the
so
winter, that's
yeah,
very, very
that's
hot.
not the one reason is because the major reason is because Russians don't like to get the cross breeze on them because they will get sick or something. So they close the
Right.
window, and then you have this argument going on between people or open the
Yeah.
window, close the window, open the window.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's
let's
the
get back
same.
to the salary real quick. So you jumped in salary quite a bit.
Yeah.
How did your like living standard of living then change?
I mean, the only thing that
What
really
did you
changed,
spend your money on?
yeah, my wife and I, we would go out to eat a lot more often. That was really kind of the only change. But I mean, in Moscow, I mean, how much can you spend on food? I remember one month I looked at our budget and we had spent, like 60,000 rubles on eating out. Which sounds like a lot, right? That's eating out, it's 2,000 rubles a day. I guess that
Yeah,
was our food budget. Sorry. That was the food we spent on cooking at home and eating out. We spent 60,000 rubles. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. But then, even at the end of the day, we spent 60,000 on our apartment. Let's say another 5,000 on all of the other fixed costs in the apartment, utilities and whatnot. 60,000 on food, but that also included going out. If I went out with friends to a restaurant and had a couple of beers with dinner. So, but still, that leaves 100,000 rubles on 267,000 free to
right.
save.
So did you save for anything
Yeah, yeah. I mean, usually most of the savings ended up going towards
like vacations or what?
yeah, I was just gonna say vacations or student loans.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So I remember,
So
when we would go back to the U.S., we wouldn't buy any clothing or anything in Russia. So when we come back to the U.S. to visit family, we'd go to the outlets and spend, $2,000 on all new clothes for the year for each of us.
we
Two
would do the
thousand dollars
same.
combined. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, we
So
would go to the U.S. and you'd spend on tickets and just a couple hotel rooms and going to the outlets. You'd spend $5,000 over. We'd usually go for 3 weeks.
uh-huh.
So
So in 2014 was it when the ruble kind of crashed? I was doing mostly private English teaching, and I was making anywhere from between 200 to 300,000 rubles a month, and that was good in U.S. dollars before the crash, and then
yeah,
pretty much halved.
right.
So at that point, I just told a lot of my clients that the price was going up, and a lot of them just said okay, and so. But I kind of changed my strategy, and I started working at a private school as well. My salary was anywhere from 4 to 500,000 at the highest point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was working a lot, and I had 2 kids, so I was spending about 60,000 rubles at the end there when in 2019, 66,000 rubles on an apartment in the south near the metro. It was, let's see, it was about 95 square meters,
It's about 1,000 square
which
feet.
is 1,000, yeah. And it was lower than the actual uh, um, apartments. Like it would probably go for 80 or 90, but we stayed there for about 3 years, and we were able to save and save quite a bit. I did spend a lot on my daughter's education because they went to a private school.
How much
So
did
that was
cost?
the
'Cause
biggest.
I know a lot of people are worried about that. Some of the more expensive private schools in Moscow are thousands of dollars a month.
Right. So there's kind of two options for foreigners. If you can afford it, you go to one of the higher, more expensive places. We went to the German school, and that was 7,000 euros a year
Oh, that's
per
reasonable.
kid, and it was reasonable compared to the English,
Right. The Anglo-American school
international
is
schools.
25 to $30,000 a year.
It's an Ivy League college level.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I had bought a car in 2014 just because we had 2 kids. With one kid, it was fine. We still use buses and metro. But again, our costs really were our apartment, so it was 60,000 or less. We moved a couple times. Our apartments ranged from 65 square meters to 95 square meters. I always had a Metro Pass. I bought for the year. It was, I think, 5,000 rubles. Maybe it's around 6 now. So I just bought that for the year to use anytime on any bus. All our mobile phone internet. So a good 80,000 or so on just living expenses, and then food we spent with 4 of us, so 2 adults, two little kids. We spent between 20 and 30,000 rubles on food alone, and we cooked at home most of the time.
Yeah.
So we were able to save quite a bit. We spent the rest of that usually on vacation. So
Yeah.
on road trips to Europe. On let's see, we went to Turkey, we went to Tunisia on those all expenses included,
Yeah.
or the all inclusive trips
Yep.
that Russians go on. And then we saved some too as well. So
Yeah. I mean, I think if we want to break it down, right? So if you're a single person, 100,000 rubles is probably the bare minimum you want to accept for a salary. If you accept something less, just make sure you know you're going to have free time that you can do some private English teaching lessons, for example, and you can easily get to 100,000 pretty quickly with a couple hours a week. If you've got, if you're a couple, you probably want to look at about 200,000 to be quite comfortable. You really don't have to worry about much.
Right.
You might not save a lot in dollars or euros, but you can live very comfortably on 200,000 in Moscow. If you've got a family, if you have to pay for education for a
the
private school,
number one question is the education. If
you,
you've got a family, 200, 300 is fine, but the education will kind of cripple you, really.
right.
So unless you go to Russian kindergarten, Russian school, which is doable. A lot of expats have gone that route, just because they want their kids to learn Russian.
Right.
So, but that's kind of the level of comfort that I would say Westerners would want to have. 100,000 if you're single, up to 200 if you're you know, a married couple, and then if you have a family, 300 plus is really the threshold.
Right. You could probably
And
make
then
do with a family on 250 and be quite comfortable. But again, you're not going to be saving much, and you're not going to be sending your child to any private schools. You're going to be living like a Russian, very comfortably, but living more like a Russian.
I knew quite a few expats who spent way more on their on their accommodation just because they wanted the comfort, right?
Right.
They lived in the German housing, or you know, downtown. They wanted to be close to work. I wasn't really ever willing to pay that much, mainly because it was always we knew that we would probably move. So that's one factor, that if you are coming from a big house, and you might have to get used to, you know, a smaller place. And another factor, just the standard of living, like, is almost the same on those thresholds. But one thing that I really missed is we never had a dryer to dry our clothes.
Yeah.
Only washer. Did you have a dryer?
No. I knew a couple expats who had one. I mean, they sell them in Russia. It's just space is such a premium in most apartments that just don't fit.
Right.
So
anyway,
I hope we gave a good example of kind of what it's like to live on certain salaries in Russia. If you have vastly different experience, let us know in the comments. This was Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have a question about Russia, let us know in the comments. We'll answer it in another video.